If it was in the exam, you would have looked at all the data. Remember what I said previously. Look what the question gives. You cannot skip the information and go directly to the questions. Then you will not be able to answer them. And then you will often find that you are answering questions that are not relevant. So please make the time in the exam. Study the information that they give. Make sure that you are aware of what happens with the information. Now we can go to our first question. Number 1. By how much did the price of chicken change from January 2008 to February 2008? Now let us go to the chicken. A 2 kilogram chicken was in January 28 Rand 23 and in February 24 Rand 92. Now the question didn't ask the inflation rate, but I want to show you that it can be calculated. I'm going to answer this question, but also calculate the inflation rate. Now to do so, I will show you the inflation rate. Sorry, it's upside down. Can you please fix it for us? Right, the inflation, the price of the chicken. If we quickly look at the first price of the first price in, I'm going to write it here, January 2008, and the price of it was in February 2008. In January it was 28 Rand 23, and in February it was 24 Rand 92. So what is the first thing that you noticed? From 28 to 24, what happened? There was a decrease. So yes, the price of the chicken came down. So that was the first question. Question 1 asked, by how much did the price of the chicken change? So it will be 28 Rand 23 minus the 24 Rand 92. And if I subtract that, it gives you 3 Rand 31. That is by how much it decreased. But I asked you, we must also be able to calculate the inflation rate. And I want to show you how I calculate the inflation rate. What is the first thing that I have to write down? Is of course my formula. So I start with my formula. Inflation rate is equals to the increase. But in this instance, it's not an increase, but a decrease. So we write it is the decrease in the price over the initial price multiplied by 100%. There's my formula. When I'm working with a formula, my second rule is always to substitute. The decrease I've already calculated, but I can still do it by saying it is the 24 Rand 92 minus the 28 Rand. Now you're going to ask me, but why do I do that? Because if I look at my original formula, it said the increase, and it's usually the new price minus the old price. I'm going to put it here in brackets. If you look at many question papers, they also give you these terms. New price minus the old price over the old price. You can go look this up and you will find that often they refer to those terms as well. So to find the decrease, it is the new price minus the old price over the initial price, which was 28 Rand 23. It's a percentage we're calculating, so we multiply by 100%. Now when I simplify it, it gives you minus 3 Rand 31 over 28 Rand 23, multiply by 100%. And if I simplify it, it gives you minus 11,7%. Now, what is important about that final answer? What did we say? It is not deflation that causes prices to drop. It is only when the inflation rate is negative that prices decrease. So in this instance, the inflation rate of the chicken was minus 11,7%. And that is why the price decreased from 28 Rand 23 to 24 Rand 92. Right, let us have a look at another possible question. If the inflation rate from February 2008 to March 2008 was 1,6%, determine how much Solly might have paid for a 12,5 kilogram packet of flour in March 2008. What must I go find first? I have to go look for the flour. There, I've marked it for you. Flour, 12,5 kilogram. January it was 64 Rand 72. February it was 72 Rand 24. But now the flour's inflation rate was 1,6%. Do you notice something? In the beginning, when I said the basket of 1,500 goods is used to determine the inflation rate, I mentioned to you that not all products have the same difference in price. And that's why they work with an average rate of inflation. In this one question, we are working with two different inflation rates, of which the first one was a negative inflation rate, which caused the drop in the price. Now, with the flour, it has a positive inflation rate of 1,6. So, it already shows you that the per item, the inflation rate is not the same, and that's why the average is used. But let us go and calculate this one to see how it will be calculated. It is very similar to the one of the house, where we had now the price of the flour, just right here, what we are working with now. The flour's price in February was 72 Rand and 24 cents. Now they say the inflation rate is 1,6%. So it's similar to the house. Now remember, there are two possible ways to calculate it. I can say either it is the 100% of the price plus the 1,6%, which is equals to 101,6%. And then I can say it is the 72 Rand 24 multiply by 101,6%. And if I take my calculator, I will say 72,24 multiply by 101,6, because it's percent, divide by 100, and that gives me the answer of 73 Rand. And now be careful for the rounding. I'm going to write all the digits down and just remind you of how to round. Remember, it's money, but in any case, we only round to 2 decimals. And then I look at the one next door. If it is 5 or more, it's going to change that one. So if I round it, it becomes a 0 and a 4. So the new price will be 73 Rand and 40 cents. And that's the new price of the flour. Remember, the alternative method is to first calculate the 1,6% and then to remember to add it to the 72 Rand 24. Right, so now you have done both an example, I'll just show them to you again, of calculating the change in the product, of calculating the inflation rate, but be careful when there's a decrease. Always remember it's the new price minus the old price over the old price. Substitute, simplify, and don't get a fright when there's a negative, because the moment you see a negative, you know that it is a decrease. And then, like similar to the house, if inflation is added, I can either calculate the 1.6% first and then add it, or add it to the percentage, and I found my value. Remember to round your answers to 2 decimals. Right, we continue now with the next one. Here is an example of a graph again. Remember, paper 2 likes to ask questions on interpreting data. And here is once again the annual inflation rate. I want to emphasize this, the annual average inflation rate from January 2008 to March 2009. Now here are different types of questions that could be asked. If I look at this graph, one possible question can also be, once again, what trend do you notice? Because this shows us how the inflation rate is just keeping on increasing and increasing. But these questions, these questions says, by what percentage did the price increase from October 2006 to October 2007? Please, when you use a graph to interpret information, take a pen or a pencil or a highlighter and go and mark the information. You don't have to keep it clean. Take your color pen or whatever you have available. Go look for October 2006. There's October 2006. And please use your ruler, because I can't use my ruler now. But what is the value that we find? Is 5.4%. So that is the first value that you will write down. And the next value is October 2007. So now I have to go to October 2007, and I take my ruler and I go and I find the value of October 2007. And what do you notice then? The values of the two will be then 5.4%, and October's is 8.4%, and the difference then will be 3%. So by what percentage did it increase? From 5.4% to 8.4%, and that will give you, 7.9%, not 8.4, 7.9%, and that gives you, if I 7.9% minus the 5.4%, and that gives you a difference of 2.5%. Another possible question, in which months and years was the inflation rate 7%? Now I go to my y-axis, I look at 7, and if I can find all the 7s, I can go down and say, oh, but it was April 2007. The another 7 is June 2007, and another 7% is July 2007. Just use your rulers and make sure that you interpret the value correctly. There's another possible question on inflation. Now we've come to the last part of inflation, and that is the Consumer Price Index. This is the last possible calculation that is required of you to do. But before you can do it, it is very important that you must first, once again, understand how it works. Because you cannot calculate it if you don't understand it. Now let us look. The index reference period. Now that is the first part that sounds very strange. The index reference period is a specific year. Because when we calculate the CPI, we work from a specific year. Now if you look further, it says it is called the base year. So we work from a specific year, and that year is the base year. You can work from any year. You can say, let's see from 2010, what was the difference in the CPI. You can say, let's work from 1900s and see what is the CPI. Just as long as you have the price of your base year. We will do an example of that now. It often differs both from the weight reference period and the price reference period. That means today something costs maybe 10 Rand. 4 years ago it was 6 Rand. So the base year will be 6 Rand. And now it's 10 Rand. That's why they say they differ from each other. This is just a matter of rescaling the whole time series to make the value of the index reference period equals to 100. That is very important. So your base year, the original year that you start doing your calculations from, is always 100. Now, sometimes, once again, they give you a table with the base year and all the other values, but they can also ask you to calculate that. But don't worry, I will show you how. Now, this is how it's done if they don't give you the base year. Choose one item you have purchased in the past. Try to find something that you have an exact number for and what you have recently purchased as well. This product will be your reference CPI or your base. Write down the price of the reference CPI. The starting CPI is always 100. Now here is an easy example. A pen costs R1.50 in 2012. This now will be your core CPI of 100 for the first year. Now, this is in 2013, that same pen costs R1.75. Now, I don't have the CPI of that year, but I can find it. And how? Very easy. Just take the value of the second year and divide it by the value of the first year. And it gives you a CPI of 116.6. What do you notice? Now I've got two CPIs. I've got my first CPI of 100, and I've got my second CPI of 116. And now the best part is, from those two CPIs, I can calculate the inflation rate. Here is another formula. But I wonder if you can spot the similarity again. It is the CPI of the second year minus the CPI of the first year over the CPI of the first year. Can I substitute those words with other words? The new CPI minus the old CPI over the old CPI. And of course, because it's a percentage, multiply by 100%. Formula, second rule, substitute. There's my second CPI. I've already determined it. The first one was 100 over the original one, which of course was also 100, multiply by 100%, and that gives you 16.6%. That is the last calculation that you must be able to do. I'm just going to shortly repeat it again. You must be able to find the CPI, But remember, they'll never expect you to do something if they don't give you enough information. So they would have given you the 2 prices of the 2 years. And from those 2 prices, you can find the first one will be the 100, the CPI of 100, and the second one you can calculate by dividing the second one by the first one. And then I can calculate my inflation rate, which is similar to the one that we have already used. So that is it. Now let's look at the examples they used in a previous exam. If you want to go and consult the whole question paper, it is November 2010, paper 2. Question 5, there it is. In the question paper, they explained what was CPI, but I am sure all of you will know now what is CPI. But if you don't, just read it again. The Consumer Price Index is the price of a collection or a basket. Remember now what the basket refers to, of goods and services. And the prices of these goods and services are collected every month. And the total cost of a basket is compared to that of the previous month's total. And remember, over a period of a year, they find the average or the mean, and that gives us our annual inflation rate. The CPI is the official measure of inflation. Don't confuse the two. Inflation rate is the percentage one, but CPI is the Consumer Price Index. It's a long word, so remember it's a long number. It will always be 100 or more. Inflation is generally given as a percentage and the measure of how much the price of goods and services have increased over a period of time. In 2008, the Statistics South Africa, remember I said if you want to know more you can always Google their website, decided that a fruit basket should consist of bananas, apples, oranges, lemons, since these types of fruits are generally available throughout the year. So can you remember previously I told you there's a CPIF where it only works with food. Now in this instance they only work with fruit and not food. The graph drawn on an annexure F, I will show that to you now, shows the month-on-month changes in the CPI from January to December as expressed as a percentage. Remember, then it is the inflation rate. Now it says, use the graph drawn on the annexure to follow the question, answer the following questions. Now I just want to highlight the words, and if you can, just jot the keyword down, because I'm going to go to the graph and then you're going to forget what the questions ask. So let's look at the keyword, and if possible, write them down for me. The first one says, name the consecutive months between which there was no change. Okay, so that's the key word. I want you to write down no change. So we're going to look at the graph where there's no change. Then number B said, which months was the CPI less? So there's the key word. Where was the CPI less than that of the previous month? So the first one was no change. The second one was less. Now let's look at the third one. Name the consecutive months between which the increase in the CPI was the greatest. So what is the key word here? The greatest. For those who are not sure, the word consecutive means the one after the other. So it will not be January, May, December. Consecutive means January, February, March, one after the other in a certain order. That is just some terminology because it often appears in papers. Right, so let's quickly look at our keywords. No change, less than the previous, increase was the greatest. Now I'm going to show you the graph. Let us look at the graph. It is a very interesting graph. Now let's look what it's about. Month-on-month changes in the CPI of a fruit basket. If we go to our x-axis, it shows us the month. And remember when they spoke of consecutive months, January, February, March, none of them are omitted. Then also, what is our y-axis? Is the percentage change, or what we refer to as the inflation. They've plotted the points, and there you can see a lot of changes in that. But what did the question ask? Remember I said some time ago, a question only has two parts. What do they give? What do they ask? In this instance, they gave us the graph. What was the first thing that they asked? Where was there no change? And if I look on this graph, between those 2 points, can you see that there is not a slope increasing and there is not a slope decreasing? So when a slope is constant, it means there is no change. But the question asks which months. So now I take my ruler and I go all the way down and I see it is between July and August. Remember what the question said? Consecutive months. It means 2 months after each other. And August is after July. Right, now we go to the second question. And the second question said, where was the CPI less than the previous month? Oh, if it's less than the previous month, then it must be somewhere where there is an increase. Because if the one was less than the other, the next one will be more. So now I go look, where is there an increase? Now from February to March, the graph increases. If I look from March to April, what does it say? It also increases. And from May to June, it also increases. And from June to July, it also increases. And there it was the same, there it decreased. And from September to October, it also increased. And from October to November, it also increased. So you are lucky, because this question has about 6 possible answers. You could have mentioned any one of them. The secret was, I cannot say from February to April. Why? Because the question stipulated consecutive months. So it must be either from February to March or March to April, or any of the other relevant. Right, the last question on that section said, where was the increase the greatest? Remember, for an increase to be great, it means the slope is very steep. And if you look at these graphs, there was a slight increase. There was a big increase. There was a fairly average increases. There was a small increase, and there was a big increase. So if I look at the graph, there are 2 possible increases. But for me to make sure which one it is, you will have to go and calculate them. And you can see the first one is from minus 1,8 to another value is 3.9. And if I get the difference between that one, it gives you 5.7%. Now I have to test this one, and it's from 0 to 5.8. And if I subtract it, it gives you 5.3. So which one is the greatest? The one that is from 1.8 to 3.9. Right. So the one that gives you the biggest increase then will then show you which one was the steepest slope. Now I want to go back to the questions. So the steepest one, sorry, there's a mistake. It was then from October and November. Now the next question, if I look at question 5.1.2, determine the percentage change from April to May. So let's go to the graph, the percentage change from April to May. How much was it in April? It was 3,9. How much was it in May? Minus 4,1. Because all the units are already in percentage, I can just subtract them from each other and say it is minus 4,1 minus 3,9, and that gives me an average of minus 8. Once again, remember what I said. If the increase is a negative or the decrease is a negative or your inflation rate is a negative, it shows you that there was a decrease. Right, the last question on this section. Calculate the price of the fruit basket in May 2008 if it cost 150 in April 2008. Now remember, what did we see? There was a decrease. So now it means that that price must actually come down. So let us quickly calculate that value of the new price. Let us start. The first one. The price of the basket was 150 Rand. Our inflation rate we saw was now minus 8%. So immediately the minus shows me that that price must decrease. So how do I calculate it? There are two ways again. I can already say it's the 100% the original price was minus the 8%, which gives you, it is now only 92% of the value. So then 92% of the 150 Rand, and if I calculate that, remember it's percentage, 92 divide by 100 multiply by the 150 Rand of the price. And now the current value of that basket is 138 Rand. How do I check it? Remember, what did the question ask? It asked, now what will the new value be if the price of the basket was 150 Rand and the inflation rate has a negative. So the price must then decrease. And that's how you check if your answers are correct. Right. Now the next section that I want you to do is the second part of that question as it was in the question paper. There was the graph. Right. There is the second part of that question as it appeared in the question paper of November 2010. In November 2009, Statistics South Africa announced that the annual inflation rate was 5.8%. Now the first question says, determine the price of the bicycle in November 2008 if it cost 1,586 Rand 95 in November 2009. And guess what most children do? They see the price, they see the percentage, and immediately they go calculate 5.8% of the amount. Be careful. Look what the question gives. It says, determine the price of the bicycle in November 2008. The current year is 2009. So what is happening in this question? We are going back. So the price of 1,586 Rand 95 already has the inflation in the price. Remember that first picture in the beginning, that balloon that was so inflated? This price is the inflated price. What do they ask? How much was it before the inflation. Now, I wonder how many of you can tell me where in our maths do we use the same principle? Can I tell you? When we work with VAT inclusive and VAT exclusive. Remember, when we speak of VAT inclusive, it means the VAT is already in the price. And often they give you questions to say, what was the amount without VAT? Or they would ask you, how much was the VAT? Now, this question works exactly on the same principle. This price of R1,586.95 is the big fat inflated price. So how are we going to do this? Let me show you. Right. Let's start with our big inflated price. I'm actually going to write it big so that you can remember that this price is already the inflated price. What was added to it? In this price, they have already added the 5.8%. And now, I want to know, because remember, this is 2009, and I want to know what was it worth the previous year. And that is the catching point. So you can think this is a typical paper 2 question. But it's very easy. It works the same as the VAT. Now, I'm just going to explain it to you, and then I'm going to show you the shorter way. What actually happened is they said 5.8% of an amount, I'm just using a placeholder, gave you the inflation. Right, that was the amount of the inflation. Then they took that inflation and they added it to that same amount to get R1,586.95. That is what they actually did. And now what are they asking us? Now they are asking us, but what was that original amount? Now the easiest way to do it is to say that it is R1,586.95, and we're actually dividing by the percentage. But now it is difficult to divide by the percentage. So what do? We multiply with its inverse. So then it becomes multiply by 100 over 105.8. Where did the 105.8 come from? Remember, it was the original 100% of the price plus the inflation, which was 5.8%. So that's where I got my 105.8%. So instead, let me just show it to you. Instead of saying 1,586.95 dividing by the 105.8%, remember 105.8% is a fraction. It's actually 105.8 over 100. But when you divide with a fraction, you multiply with its inverse. We learned that in the lower grades. And that's why I take the value and I multiply it by 100 over 105.8. Just to remind you, it works the same with the VAT. I'm just going to write it here so you can also remember it. If it's VAT inclusive, then you will also take the amount that is inclusive and multiply it by 100, dividing it by 114 to find what the original value was. It's just something for you to remember. But the principle is the same, because this big amount was already inflated with the inflation. And when I work with VAT inclusive, the amount is already with the VAT. It is inside. And that's how I find the answer. And if I calculate that, sorry, let me just put that aside. It will give you 1,499 Rand 95. So that bicycle that was in the second year, in 2009, that bicycle was 1,586 Rand 95. But the question asked in the previous year. So remember, we have to get rid of that inflation. And that's why we multiply with 100 over 105,8. And that gives us, what was it worth the previous year? Right. And the similar principle is applied when we speak of VAT and VAT inclusive. Right, I see that our time is running very short, and there's so 5 minutes left, and there's so much I still want to share with you. I'm going to give you two more questions, because as I say, the time is now unfortunately very short. The first one I want to give you is this question. Because one of the things that I mentioned previously was the purchasing power of something that the purchasing power decreases. If you look at this question number 2, it said, today you paid 340 Rand for 20 energy saver light bulbs. The inflation rate of these bulbs is 9% per year. How many of them will you be able to buy for 340 Rand in 1 year's time? I want to show you this because this is a question where we have to look at the purchasing power of our money. Just to give you then the example, if I say there were 340 Rand, I could buy 20 bulbs. Right? And it said that the inflation, I'm just going to abbreviate quickly, is 9% per year. So now I first have to go and look at my price per bulb. So it's going to be 340 divided by 20, and you can take your calculator for that, and that gives you, it was 17 bulbs. So now I need the price of one bulb. Divide by 20, so it was 17 bulbs. No, sorry, 20 bulbs gives you 17 Rand. So now the inflation is 9%. So it's going to be 9%, or I'm going to add it already to the original price, 109% of the 17 Rand, because that is the price per bulb. And that is going to give you 18 Rand and 53 cents. Remember now, this is the new price. I'm going to write it here. The new price with the inflation. So I'm going to draw a big balloon around it so that you can see it is the inflated price. So now the question said, I still only have 340 Rand. Now it says, how many bulbs can I buy in a year's time? So I have to go and divide it in the new price with the inflation. So it's 340 divided by 18.53, and that is equals to, now be careful, 18 comma, if I round it 3, 5 bulbs. But tell me, can I go buy a half a bulb or a 0.35 bulb? No, because I only have that money. So I can't round it up to make it another bulb. In this case, I must round it down. So rounded, I'm only going to buy all 18 bulbs. Right, that is just to show you how the purchasing power decreases if I have had 340 Rand, I could have bought 20 bulbs, but because of inflation that increased the price per bulb, I could now, for the same amount, with the new inflated price, I could only buy 18 bulbs. I'm really sorry that we have run out of time. I just want to show you where the CPI was calculated. Just an example, there is a table where the CPI was already calculated for you, and then there's just questions that were asked. From those two, remember the formula. If I have two values, I can find the inflation rate. By substituting my values into my formula, I can find the inflation rate. Right. Unfortunately, we have come to the end. And all I can say is enjoy these last few weeks that you have left as a grade 12 learner. Remember, what you put in is what you are going to get out. So I really want you to work hard. And you know the secret with maths is practice, practice, practice. All the material you can find, do them, practice them. Go back to your teachers if you are not sure. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.